Started with whispers and ended with a name carved into stone. Mine. I married into an old family with an even older house, one that watches more than it shelters. Now I can't tell if I escaped or if it simply let me go. I woke up at 3:11 a.m. to the sound of whispering. Not the dream kind, the real kind, low and shaky, coming from the end of the bed. I opened my eyes and nearly screamed. My mother-in-law, Eleanor, was standing there in the dark, still, in her nightgown, hands clenched, eyes too wide. She didn't speak at first, just looked at me. Not like a woman who found you in her home, like a woman who'd been waiting for you to wake up. I sat up slowly, heart pounding. Eleanor. I whispered. What are you doing? She took a step forward and said just one thing. You need to leave this house before it eats you too. I thought I misheard. Excuse me, I said. Her lips trembled. I've seen it before. The way it starts. The way it finishes. You'll die here if you stay. And then she turned and walked out. Not hurried, like someone who already knew I wouldn't listen. Let me back up. My name is Claire. I'm 29. I married Thomas Gallagher a year and a half ago. We live in his family's estate, a sprawling ivy-covered house an hour outside of Boston. It's old, creaky, full of antiques and photos of people who all look like they hated each other. Thomas grew up here. He loves the place. Calls it the house that built us. I used to think that sounded poetic. Now it sounds like a warning. His mother Eleanor moved back in with us 6 months ago, after a fall. That's all anyone says. A fall. No details. She doesn't talk much. Stares a lot. Walks the halls at night. Sometimes I hear her whispering to portraits in the hallway. I chalked it up to age, stress, grief. But after that night, 3:11 a.m., her standing at the foot of my bed like a ghost, I couldn't ignore it anymore. When I asked her about it the next day, she acted like it never happened. Said she slept fine. Said I must have dreamed it. But later that same afternoon, she came up to me while I was folding towels and quietly asked, Has the house started whispering to you yet? I froze. She nodded slowly, like my silence was an answer, then walked away again. That night I asked Thomas if anything weird ever happened when he was growing up. He laughed. Weird how? Like ghosts. I shrugged. I don't know. Sounds. Feelings. Waking up and seeing people who shouldn't be there. He looked at me like I was joking. My mom's just old, Claire. That house is in her head. What if it's not just in her head? I asked. He smiled. Well, then it's in yours now too. I laughed with him. Pretended it was funny. Pretended it didn't bother me. But that night I couldn't sleep. Because when I turned off the lights, the hallway stayed just a little too dark. And from the corner of the room, I swear I heard breathing that didn't belong to either of us. The first whisper came the next night. It was nearly 2 a.m. and I couldn't sleep. Thomas was out cold beside me, breathing deeply like nothing in the world could touch him. I lay staring at the ceiling, arms over the blanket, waiting for nothing and everything all at once. Then I heard it. A voice. So soft I thought it was the wind at first. But no, the windows were shut. No breeze. No trees brushing the glass. It wasn't a full sentence. Just my name. Claire. Drawn out like a question. Not angry. Not kind. Just hungry. I sat up, heart racing, the sound still echoing behind my ribs. I told myself it was the pipes. Old houses make sounds. I've heard them. I've lived with them. But pipes don't know your name. The next morning I was pale. Shaky. Thomas kissed my forehead and said I looked tired. I told him I was fine. Eleanor didn't speak to me at breakfast. She just watched me over her cup of tea. Eyes locked on mine like she was waiting for me to say something. I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I distracted myself with chores. Folding laundry. Wiping counters that weren't dirty. Dusting bookshelves lined with brittle novels no one had touched in decades. That's when I found it. In the library. A panel in the wall behind the desk. It looked like part of the wood trim, same grain, same tone. But when I ran my hand along it, I felt a faint groove. I pushed. Nothing. Pried a little with the letter opener. It gave way with a soft click. Inside was a narrow space, like a hollowed-out gap in the wall. There was dust, cobwebs, and a small box made of blackened oak. It had no lock. Just a lid, carved with something I didn't recognize. A circle with jagged edges and a symbol like an eye in the center. I opened it. Inside were folded letters. And hair, tied with a red ribbon. The hair was gray and brittle. And the letters, they were all addressed to Eleanor. Different handwriting. Different dates, all spanning over 30 years. Each one said the same thing. He's watching me again. I don't feel like myself. There's something wrong with the house. I can't sleep. I can't breathe. I see things that aren't there, or maybe they are. One letter ended with, "Tell the next one. Don't let her stay." I dropped the box. Literally, it hit the floor and scattered paper like leaves. I heard footsteps and nearly jumped out of my skin. It was Eleanor. She stood in the doorway of the library. No expression. Just her eyes locked on the box. "You weren't supposed to find that yet," she said. "What is this?" I asked, voice shaking. "Warnings," she said softly. "From the others." "Others?" She walked in, crouched down slowly, and picked up one of the letters with reverence. Then looked at me. "You're not the first woman to live in this house who's felt it." "Felt what?" She stared at the box. "The house has a memory. It remembers pain. And it feeds." I wanted to scream. Laugh. Cry. Something. "You sound insane," I whispered. She nodded slowly. "That's what they said about me too." Then she stood up and walked out, leaving me with the box, the hair, and a pressure in my chest like I was drowning in dry air. That night, I didn't sleep in our bedroom. I curled up on the couch in the guest room, door locked, lights on. Thomas asked why. I said I felt sick. He didn't press. At 3:11 a.m., I woke to the sound of the doorknob jiggling. Soft. Slow. Deliberate. Like whoever was on the other side wasn't trying to get in. Just reminding me they could. The next morning, I woke up with the light still on. I'd fallen asleep on the guest room couch, twisted in a blanket that didn't smell like home. My neck ached. My back was tight. But I didn't move right away. I was listening. The house was quiet, but not in a peaceful way. It was the kind of silence that waits. Like the air before a thunderstorm. I heard Eleanor humming somewhere down the hall, tuneless, broken, like a lullaby she didn't quite remember. I stood up, crept to the door, and cracked it open. Nothing. The hallway was empty, but the air felt tilted, like something had just passed through. Later that day, I made tea and asked Eleanor to sit with me. She didn't hesitate. She sat across the table, folded her hands in her lap, and said nothing. So I started. The letters. The box. You said there were others. Who were they? Her eyes met mine, clear and sharp for the first time since I'd met her. My sister was the first. I froze. Your sister? She nodded. Her name was Mary. She married my uncle when I was 12. That's how our family used to keep the estate, passed through blood. Mary was young. Smart. Too bright for this place. She paused, looking past me like the walls were showing her memories. She didn't last 2 years. She started talking to shadows. Hiding in closets. One night she scratched the words, "Get me out," into the floor under her bed. What happened to her? Eleanor took a sip of tea. She jumped from the 3rd-floor window. At least, that's what they said. But I was there. I saw her eyes before it happened. She leaned closer. They weren't hers anymore. I wanted to believe this was just old age. Trauma. A fractured memory stitched together by grief. But then she said. She tried to leave 3 times. Each time, something stopped her. Her tires slashed. Her bags unpacked. Her letters never sent. That house, it doesn't let go easy. That night, I didn't tell Thomas. I didn't ask him anything. Because I was starting to see something behind his eyes too. A kind of tension. Not fear. More like pressure. Like he was trying very hard to keep something down. He watched me more closely now. Asked where I went. What I did during the day. And when I mentioned I was thinking about visiting my sister in Vermont for a weekend, his jaw tightened just slightly. We've got a lot going on right now, he said. You sure this is the time to disappear? It sounded innocent. Caring even. But my skin prickled. That night, I heard voices in the hallway again. But this time it wasn't a whisper. It was laughter. Low, feminine laughter. Coming from the stairwell. I opened the door and looked out. No one. But when I stepped into the hall, the temperature dropped like someone had opened a freezer. And on the mirror hanging outside our bedroom, written in condensation, was a word. Stay. I backed away. Closed the door. Locked it. And for the first time, I allowed myself to say it out loud. Something is wrong with this house. I started searching. In the days that followed, I went through the attic, the basement, every closet and drawer I could find. I found old photographs, women with dark eyes and pale faces. One of them was Mary, I think. Another looked disturbingly like me. In the basement, I found a notebook, tucked behind a broken board near the boiler. The pages were stained, crinkled, barely legible. But I made out one line written over and over on the last page. It comes through the husband, but it lives in the house. I didn't know what that meant. Not yet. But I knew I had to get out. And soon. The next night, I tried to leave. I packed a bag, went to the garage. The car wouldn't start. Not a dead battery, disconnected wires. Clean. Deliberate. When I came back inside, Thomas was in the kitchen. He looked at my bag, then at me. Smiled. Planning a trip? Planning a trip? Thomas's voice was soft, but the edges were wrong. Too smooth. Too quiet. The way someone talks to a frightened animal they're trying to corner. I didn't answer right away. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed. His eyes flicked to my overnight bag sitting on the floor, then back to me. Claire. I was just going to visit my sister. A pause. A beat too long. He nodded. Slowly. Then walked past me into the living room. Call her. Let her know I'll bring you to the train station tomorrow. It sounded generous. But my gut twisted. The next morning, the front tires of my car were slashed. Not punctured. Sliced, clean and deliberate, just like the last time. Eleanor was the one who told me. She knocked on my door holding a cup of tea. She didn't speak. Just handed me the mug and said quietly, "It won't let you leave now. Not until it's done." "What is?" I asked, my voice trembling. "The house. The house is part of it. But it's more than that." She sat down across from me, knees shaking slightly as she lowered herself into the chair. "You think this started with Mary?" she asked. She was just the first who broke. I leaned forward. "Tell me." She stared into her tea like she was reading the past in the steam. "There's something in the Gallagher bloodline. Something old. They say it's a curse. I think it's a pattern. A hunger passed down, masked as legacy." I didn't speak. The house was built in 1889. Every Gallagher man since then has brought a wife here. And every one of those wives changed. Quietly. Slowly. They gave up things they loved. Friends stopped visiting. Their names faded from family records. What happened to them? I whispered. She looked up, eyes sharp now. Some left. A few. They were smart. Fast. Brave. But the others? They disappeared. Emotionally at first. Then physically. Their photos removed. Their belongings burned. One by one, their names vanished from the walls. And no one asked questions? Who would they ask? The Gallaghers are respected. Powerful. Untouchable. I shook my head, trying to make it make sense. But Thomas, he's not like that. Her face softened. Sad. Knowing. Isn't he? I started paying closer attention after that. And I saw it. The way Thomas always knew where I was. The way he'd appear in the hallway the moment I moved from room to room. The way the house shifted when he was near, floors creaked louder, windows rattled for no reason. It was like he was part of it. Or worse, like it was part of him. 3 days later, I woke up to find all the windows in the guest room sealed shut. Nailed. From the outside. When I asked Thomas, he smiled. Drafts, he said. You always get cold at night, remember? That night, I tried calling my sister. The line was dead. Cell signal? Gone. Wi-Fi? Suddenly down for maintenance. When I confronted Thomas, he didn't deny it. He just shrugged. We've been so disconnected lately. I thought it might help. Later that evening, I caught Eleanor burning something in the fireplace. Old pages. I only caught a glimpse. But I saw names. Dates. A family tree. They erased them, she whispered. The ones who resist. What happens if I stay? I asked. She looked up at me. And for the first time, her voice cracked. You become one of them. The next day, all the photos in the upstairs hallway had changed. I swear to God. The women in the frames, the same ones I'd seen 100 times, their eyes were different. Instead of looking forward, they were all turned slightly, watching me. Every single one. And in the center, a new portrait. Not a photo. A painting. Of me. Smiling. Wearing the emerald dress from the dinner party. Hair pinned back. Eyes hollow. It hadn't been there yesterday. I stopped sleeping. Not because I was afraid of nightmares, but because I was afraid of being awake in them. The house had changed. Not just in feeling and shape. The hallway to the attic stretched longer than it had the day before. The guest room door moved a few inches to the left. The kitchen drawers rearranged themselves in the night. And the old grandfather clock, the one Thomas claimed never worked, now ticked in perfect rhythm with my heart rate. Every hour on the hour. I didn't ask him about the portrait. I didn't have to. He saw it, paused, smiled faintly, and moved on like it had always been there. That disturbed me more than the painting itself. Eleanor kept to her room, pale and sunken, like the house was draining her minute by minute. She didn't speak much anymore. But sometimes I'd find her standing in doorways, staring into the corners of rooms like she was counting things no one else could see. I stopped trying to leave. Something in me already knew I couldn't. My phone stayed dead, even when charged. The landline gave only silence, not a dial tone, just nothingness. Outside the windows, the world seemed unnaturally still. Like the trees had stopped growing and the air had gone stale. As if time itself had turned inward. Then came the scratching. It started behind the bedroom walls. Soft at first, like mice. Then louder. Long, deliberate strokes. Up. Down. Something writing from inside. I pressed my ear against the wall. No sound but a sensation. A pull. I didn't want to look. But I did. Under the wallpaper, beneath layers of paint and old plaster, I uncovered words. Hundreds of them. Names. Phrases. Dates. All written in the same jagged red-brown script. All women's names. Some were familiar from the old family records I'd skimmed. Others were missing from every document I'd seen. One name repeated over and over, carved deeper than the rest. Mary. 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 And beneath it something new. Still wet. Still drying. Claire. I didn't scream. Not because I wasn't scared. But because I had no energy left to give fear. Something had already taken root inside me. And now I was just trying to stay ahead of it. I began marking the walls in secret. Tiny symbols. Chalk lines. A code only I knew. Each morning at least one would vanish. Erased. Covered. As if the house were undoing me piece by piece. Thomas became quieter but more present. He was always nearby. Leaning in doorways. Watching me from the mirror. I began to wonder if he ever slept. His eyes had gone strange, too bright in the dark, like glass marbles reflecting a fire I couldn't see. The smell of lavender filled the halls, thick and choking. It reminded me of the old drawer I found weeks ago. The one with the letters. The hair. Everything perfumed. Preserved. Prepared. And that's when I understood. The house wasn't haunted. It was hungry. And it didn't take women by force, it wore them down. Made them part of the architecture. A name on a wall. A smile in a portrait. A memory inside the wood. And I was next. I found the hidden door behind the linen closet. It wasn't a door, really, just a warped piece of paneling, flush with the rest of the wall but slightly warmer to the touch. Almost like skin. It took pressure, not force, to open. Like it was waiting for someone who already knew it was there. Inside, a narrow staircase. Dustless. Still. The air was thick, warmer than the rest of the house, too still to breathe naturally. I stepped down slowly, counting each creak beneath my feet like footsteps leading into something I'd never returned from. At the bottom was a room. Small. Square. Walls of stone that didn't match the rest of the house's structure. This wasn't part of the blueprint. It was older. Much older. Candles lined the walls. Unlit. But their wax was fresh. In the center a chair. Wooden. Stained. It wasn't the kind of stain that came from age or weather. It was darker, sunken into the grain, like something had seeped into the wood and never left. The walls were covered in marks. Tallies. Dozens. Hundreds. Etched over each other in chaotic layers. Some fresh, some faded with time. Like someone had been counting, or remembering, or begging not to be forgotten. I found remnants. Fabric, the corner of a nightgown. A child's ribbon. A single silver ring tucked between the stones. Each item held silence like it had soaked it up for decades. In one corner, the plaster had crumbled. Beneath it, old wallpaper. I pulled gently, revealing a name. Mary Gallagher. It wasn't written. It was carved. Over and over. Like a mantra. Or warning. As if she had known someone else would come looking one day. I felt something behind me shift, not in sound, but in presence. The kind of awareness that makes the hair on your arms lift before your brain understands why. I didn't turn around. Instead, I stared at the stains. The chair. The history pressed into the air like humidity. The room didn't feel abandoned. It felt suspended. Waiting. When I finally left, I didn't close the panel behind me. Let it stay open. Let it breathe. Upstairs, Eleanor was sitting by the window. Pale. Still. Hands folded in her lap like a child waiting for punishment. Her eyes were glassy, unfocused, fixed on something just beyond the trees. I sat beside her without speaking. We didn't look at each other. But something passed between us. Understanding. Shame. Finality. She whispered something not to me but to the space in front of her. A name. Maybe a prayer. Later that night, the portraits on the wall looked different again. Not their faces but their expressions. They looked tired. Some looked resigned. But one, the youngest, had a new glint in her eye. Mary. I went to bed with the door open. Let the hallway stay dark. Let the whispers move freely. There was no point in pretending I could keep them out anymore. They were already in me. The morning came slow, gray, and airless. I didn't wake up so much as rise like the house allowed it. As if it had loosened its grip just enough to let me stand and finish what had already been decided. Thomas was gone. Not missing, just not present. His absence was never sudden. It was gradual, like fog rolling back into itself. The house seemed quieter without him, and yet more alert. Eleanor hadn't left her chair. She hadn't eaten in 2 days. When I passed her, she didn't look up. Down in the kitchen, the air smelled like lavender and something metallic. I didn't search for the source. Some things weren't meant to be uncovered. Not anymore. There was an envelope on the table. No name. Inside, a single page of handwriting I recognized. Thomas's. Calm. Precise. The house keeps what it's owed. The bloodline survives because someone always stays. It was Mary, then Margaret, then Elise. Eleanor was supposed to be the last. But then you came. I didn't finish reading. The note felt less like a confession and more like a contract. A legacy passed like a disease, wrapped in heritage, signed in silence. I burned it in the sink without ceremony. Eleanor died that afternoon. Not violently. Not mysteriously. She simply stopped. Eyes open, staring at the place where the woods met the horizon. I found her like that, hands folded, face oddly peaceful. And for the first time I understood. She wasn't trying to warn me. She was waiting for me to become her. Or escape her. And now I had no one left to imitate. No voice telling me what came next. That night the house whispered louder than ever. But not to me. It whispered around me, circling. Testing. Pressing up against the seams of my skin like it wanted to see how much of it had already absorbed. I stood in the hallway and looked at the portrait again. My face. But not my eyes. Then I took the frame down, carried it out to the garden, and buried it in the dirt with my bare hands. I didn't dig deep. Let the roots deal with it. I packed by moonlight. Only what I brought into the house originally. Nothing more. When I opened the front door, I half expected resistance. A slam. A howl. A final scream. But there was nothing. Just stillness. Cold. And a quiet kind of permission. The house didn't stop me. Because I wasn't running. I was leaving. And that made all the difference. I didn't look back. Because I knew if I did, I'd see my reflection in the upstairs window, staring down at me with hollow eyes, already settling into the frame. Weeks later, my sister asked why I never called her back. I said the service was bad. She asked about the house. I said, it's not mine anymore. And when she asked if I was okay now, I told her something close to the truth. Some places don't want to be escaped. Some families don't want to be forgotten. But I made them both a promise. I'd carry nothing with me. And I'd never say their name again. She didn't understand. That was the point.